Today on StockCharts in Focus, we're taking the next step in our scanning journey together, breaking down the scan workbench, showing you the building blocks that go into those custom technical scans, and getting you up and running with one of the most powerful tools and features around all of StockCharts. The ability to take your own technical criteria, put that into your own unique custom filters, and then scan the entire market for only the stocks or funds that fit that criteria. Absolutely crucial. So today, if that's been holding you up, if that's been intimidating to you at all, we're gonna break it all down. We're gonna make it approachable on the show today. So lots to cover. You know what it is. It's all new. It's all here. It's StockCharts in Focus. All right, my friends, welcome to the show, StockCharts in Focus. Of course, our product focus show here on the channel where we dig into the site, dive into the tools, show you around the features, and ultimately help you get more value out of StockCharts. That's our mission here every Friday, 3 p.m. Eastern time up on the live channel, also up on our YouTube channel after that, and of course the on-demand platform at StockChartsTV.com. Lots of ways to watch. My name is Grayson Roze, a Vice President of Operations here at StockCharts.com. Really great to be back with you for the second episode in our little scanning series that we're doing. So we're building off of last week's episode. If you didn't catch last week's episode, be sure to go back after this one and take a look at that. In that episode, we did them a little bit kind of backwards if I really think about it. But in that episode last week, we took a look at some of my favorite ways to run and review your scan results. So we wanted to start there because we know there are a lot of people that are already using scanning. So we sort of hit the ground running with that episode. But we took a look at how to do that in the Sharp Charts world and in the ACP world, digging into the Candle Glance tool, which formats all of these little mini charts for those scan results. Then we jumped over to ACP, showed you how to combine the scanning feature in ACP with the multi-chart layouts capability. So you actually get multiple time frames at once as you're reviewing your scan results. Really, really cool stuff. I love those sort of processes, those kind of workflow boosters. So on the show last week, that is what we covered. Now, this week, we're kind of going back to basics. We're going backwards a little bit, and we're going to talk about kind of the building blocks of scanning. We're going to get you up and running. For those of you who watched last week's episode, or if you're new to StockCharts and you're saying, hey, scanning sounds like an important thing, but I'm a little bit intimidated by it. I don't really know where to start. This episode is for you. We're going to walk through the scan workbench, break it down, make it a little less intimidating, but most importantly, at the end of the show, we're also going to show you some of the resources you can use to not only learn more about scanning and start to customize your own scans, but also start scanning without actually writing any scan syntax. We've got a couple of tools on the site, some old, some new, that actually make it incredibly easy to start scanning without having to worry about any sort of coding or writing your own custom criteria or anything like that. With our predefined scans tool and with our advanced scan library, our sample scan library, we've got lots of options for you. You can actually start scanning in just one click. So we got a lot to cover on the show today. We're going to show it to you all right now. Let's jump over to the site, get it going. So a fair warning for the show today. Scanning is a huge, huge topic. There is much more to cover with scanning than we can possibly hit on just one episode. So that's why we're kind of doing a little bit of a series here. We'll see what we do next week. But for today, we're really going to kind of hit the high level, the basics, the ABCs, or the building blocks of scanning. Get you started. Make sure you're kind of comfortable with kind of how things work, what scans are, how that scan workbench looks, all of that good stuff. Now, even if you are used to scanning, you've been scanning for a little while, I think today's show is actually still going to be very helpful for you. So first up, we've got to get to the scan workbench. Now, from the members dashboard right here, you've got a couple of different ways to get there. You can look for this member tools area and find that advanced scan workbench link. Or if you have the scans and alerts row turned on for your dashboard in the dashboard preferences window, you can hit scans. That'll take you right down to that scans panel. And from there, you can actually jump to a couple of those different scanning tools, including the advanced scan workbench. Now, one other way that you can get there is from the menu at the top corner of any page around the site. You can actually open that up. That'll have your name in it if you're logged in. And from there, you can hit your scans. That'll take you right over to the scans workbench. So let's talk through kind of the layout of this. I want to run through this before we get into any of the sort of criteria building. First and foremost, up here, you do have some controls for selecting any of the save scans from your account. So you can see if I open up that menu, I've got a ton of save scans in my account. I can select any of those from there. Save things, create a new scan. That'll just kind of reset all of the criteria. And I can also jump over to the Your Scans page from here and actually see all of those tools. Now we've got our scan criteria box. We're going to dive in there in just a second. Below that, though, we've got some controls for actually running the scan. When we're done writing all of that syntax, we can hit that big green button that's going to run that scan and give us our results back. But we've also got some different settings for checking the syntax. We've actually got some fancy sort of helpers built into this scan workbench. That's one thing we're going to talk about in just a minute. So you can actually hit check syntax. That'll kind of take a look at your scan and make sure that things are going to run properly. Kind of a pre-flight check, if you will, there. We've also got a reformat button that'll help you kind of clean up your scan syntax, depending on how you write it. And again, if you want to kind of get back to basics, you've got that reset button right there as well. Now, one helpful link that a lot of people gloss over is this keyboard shortcut. So if you hit that, that'll actually pop up a whole number of helpful keyboard shortcuts that you can use as you are writing your scan. So don't forget about that one. And of course, you've got a little instructions link down there as well. Now below that is a crucial part of the scan workbench called the scan components area. What this allows you to do, you can see that we have all of these different kind of groups: ticker properties, specific technical indicators, candlestick patterns, predefined scans. We've got a ton of different things in here, even things like P&F patterns. What this allows you to do is open up any of these menus, select something from this scan components area, hit add, and that'll automatically pull the syntax, as we call it, for that specific technical move or factor or whatever you've selected down here. That'll actually pull that right up into the workbench. So you don't actually have to write that scan code yourself. That is going to be huge. We're going to get into that in just a minute. I'm going to show you exactly how I use that, because to be honest, I don't really write that much scan code myself. Now I can. I've been using StockCharts for many years. I've been scanning for many years. So I do now know how to write a lot of this sort of scanning code myself. But to be honest, it's so much easier to just go down here to the scan components area, select what I'm looking for, which is generally not that crazy, and then add it up here. And if I want to start to modify it, I can do that really easily. Again, we're going to show you exactly how that works in just a minute once we're done with our kind of little tour here. Now down below, we're going to come back to this, but we do have another instructions link that's going to be very helpful for learning how to write these scans. We've got another documentation link in here for writing scans. That's going to help you not just learn about the scan workbench and the scanning tools, but also start actually writing your own custom scans. Very helpful. 2 links right there. Again, we've got some resources around the site, which we'll dig into at the end of the show for actually running scans and creating scans without having to write all that code yourself, kind of similar to what you could do with the scan components area. So scan examples, another important resource. And then of course, we've got our predefined scans page, which is another one of those tools that lets you actually start scanning without having to write any code. So speaking of scanning syntax and scanning code, let's get into the meat of today's show. I've actually selected or created a scan. This is one that I like to run, kind of built on my own approach, but it's a great example for today's show. I call this my multi-factor checklist, and this is specifically looking for stocks in the S&P 1500, as you can see. So that's going to load that scan syntax in here. And now if you're new to scanning, this is probably going to look a little bit scary at the start of the show. But I promise you in just a couple of minutes, this is all going to make total sense to you. So before we dig into that, I want to take a look at one other thing that a lot of people gloss over, which is this little row above the scan syntax area. This is kind of the starting place. You want to make sure that this sentence actually reads in a logical way for what you are trying to do. Now it's kind of creative here. The team put these little input boxes and menus and things into this kind of sentence format. So really all you have to do is actually complete this sentence, but make sure you do take a look at that to make sure that it makes sense for you. So starting X number of trading days before any of these different options, either the last market close or the last intraday update. Now we're doing this on a day where the market's actually closed, so a little funky here. But starting X number of trading days before the last intraday update, show me the symbols that meet the following criteria. You've got some different options in here. If you want to offset your scan, if you actually want to go sort of back in time, you don't want to look at the latest data, you want to look at a week ago or a month ago or even a year ago if you want to type in that big of a number, you can actually use this box to kind of offset your scan. Now this is kind of fun sometimes when you get up and running with scanning, you can actually offset sort of one day at a time and then compare those results, see how things have been changing over time. So this little sentence actually allows you to sort of move your scans throughout time, depending on what that number you type in here is going to be. Now, generally, it's just going to be left at 0 because we're going to want the latest data, right? We want to see what's happening right now. So typically, for most of my scans in particular, this is actually just set at 0, and I like to leave this on the last intraday update. So just wanted to give you guys a fair warning on that. Make sure you don't forget about that little sentence. Now, the other thing that you need to remember is to keep this advanced editor turned on. That's an easy one because it's going to be turned on for you by default. But we've got a sort of a slightly hidden little feature in here. We've hidden it for good reason because most people should be using this. Unless you really like the plain text version, the advanced editor I think makes a ton of sense. You can see that this is checked, and if I hover over it, I can actually uncheck that. Now if I uncheck the advanced editor, this scan criteria is going to look a lot more simple. This is basically just a text box on the website that you can type your text into. If you totally know what you're doing and you like to just type in that text and hit run, you don't have to use the advanced editor. But if we turn that back on, you can see that that's going to actually do a whole lot of kind of formatting and coloring. It's going to make the scan workbench a lot easier to use. It's going to highlight different sort of pieces of the criteria in different ways. It's also going to give you nice sort of error messages and warnings and things as you're going along. It'll give you tips and tricks and shortcuts, that kind of thing. And you can customize that a little bit down here. You can either choose if you want errors and warnings or just errors only. So the advanced editor, another nice piece of this scan workbench. Wanted to make sure you are aware of that. So with all that out of the way, let's start talking about our scan syntax. Again, the goal of today's show is just to kind of break down the scan workbench, get you comfortable with kind of what's on here, and most importantly, get you comfortable with the scan syntax itself, the scanning kind of code or the language of the workbench. So I've picked this multi-factor checklist because it's got a lot in it, and it's a great example, not just because it's got a lot of different components, but also because it's a pretty logical scan. It's actually not doing anything too crazy. As complex as it seems, it's a fairly long scan. It's actually not doing anything. So scanning, the thing that I always like to remind people, the scan syntax looks a little bit scary, but it's really built to be pretty logical. If you just kind of describe what you're trying to achieve with the scan workbench or what your criteria is, what you're searching for, what your filters are, if you kind of describe that to yourself almost out loud, I actually like to do that as I'm writing scans, describe it to yourself out loud, and you can really start to translate that into the scan workbench. So in this case, we're going to be looking for stocks in the S&P 1500 that are checking off a whole long list of different technical criteria, different sort of factors. That's that multi-factor checklist. And as we walk through this scan, you'll see that it's actually pretty logical. And once you get kind of the building blocks of this scan workbench in place, it's pretty easy to actually start defining what you want to put into the scan workbench. So let's start at the very top. We've got a type factor that we can put into the scan workbench. And in this case, I'm looking for stocks. So I've got this little starter here that says type equals stock. What I'm looking for is stocks. So the type of symbol that I'm looking for is stock. Pretty straightforward. Nothing too crazy there. One line down, we've got a comment. This is what we call a comment. And you can add a comment to a scan by starting that line, as you can see, with two little slashes, two little backslashes. Now, what a comment is going to do is allow you to put basically a label in your scan, and the scan workbench, when it runs that sort of code, if you will, it's going to ignore that line. So a comment is just going to be there as basically a note for you to explain something, add a little bit of context, add a reminder, anything that you want to add as a note in your scan syntax, you can add that with a comment, and that line is actually going to be ignored when it's run. So I've actually put, as you can see, a number of comments in the different kind of sections of this scan that really explain to me exactly what each block is doing. So in this case, I've got a comment in here that says S&P 1500 members only. Two little slashes will create that comment. Now, scans really run on just a couple of sort of pieces. We've got something like this line that's defining a specific factor, like type equals stock or exchange equals NASDAQ. And then from there, the other kind of main pieces are ands and ors. So when you're building a scan, you're going to have a whole list of factors, right? And there might be a couple things up at the top, like stocks in the NASDAQ. But from there, each sort of factor that you want to build into the scan is going to be an and, or it's going to be an or. So if you want, for instance, stocks trading above their 20-day moving average and trading above their 50-day moving average and trading above their 200-day moving average, you want to find symbols that are trading above all of those key moving averages. Each line that you're going to plug in is going to be an and. Now, if you're looking for multiple little factors, you can also use an or. So you either get sort of and or, if you will. So let's kind of break down this piece. You start lines with an and or an or, and then you wrap your criteria with brackets. Now, in this case, when I'm looking for S&P 1500 members, that's sort of a composite of three different groups: the S&P 500, the S&P 400 mid caps, and the S&P 600 small caps. So what I've done is I've said type is stock, and I want to find S&P 1500 members only. So I've got group is S&P 500. We can actually, again, use the scan components area down below to kind of build this in. You'll see that in just a minute. But we've got and with our little bracket here wrapping the entire group. Group is S&P 500, or group is S&P 400, or group is S&P 600. So any of these three groups are going to make up the S&P 1500. So I put each one on its own line. I've added or to the second lines because those are also viable in addition to the S&P 500. And then I've wrapped the entire thing in those brackets. So pretty straightforward. If you think about your scans in terms of kind of and logic or logic, this starts to make a lot of sense. So we've got stocks in and we want stocks, and the group is the S&P 500 or the S&P 400 or the S&P 600, and then we can start to move on through the rest of our syntax. So next up for me in this checklist filter is stocks with a market cap above 1.8 billion. Why 1.8 billion? Don't ask me. That's just kind of the number that I picked is kind of a good size for my system. So next up, we've got another comment that explains what this line does. And then we've got another line with one of those ands. So we've got our first kind of group of criteria. And then we're going to want to add in our next set of criteria. So we're going to do and market cap is above 1.8 billion. Now, in this case, market cap is a little bit of a funky one. It's actually in millions. So you can sort of think about this as 1.8 times a million or 100 million. And so that's kind of how that line prints out. But again, thinking of your scans, thinking about your criteria kind of just logically, what you're looking for are stocks in the S&P 500 or 400 or 600, and they have a market cap of more than 1.8 billion. You can think about these lines logically, and they start to make a lot more sense. They get a little less scary when you just kind of read them out and sort of think about what you're trying to accomplish with them. So next up, I've got another group in this scan that's moving averages in the correct order. So in my case, I use a set of pretty traditional moving averages, 20, 50, 100, and 200. I want to make sure that those moving averages are in the right order. So we've got an and line that says, and the 50-day moving average is above the 100-day simple moving average. SMA stands for simple moving average. So again, you can start to kind of break down what you're looking for. If you want the 50 above the 100, well, SMA 50 above SMA 100, that's kind of how you write that out. It's really not too crazy, not too scary. So I've got a couple of those lines. The 50 is above the 100, the 50 is above the 200, and the 100 is above the 200. That's going to put those moving averages in the right order, sort of for what I am looking for. Next up, I want to make sure that the moving averages are rising. So this is a little bit more complex, but we've got another couple of and lines because again, this is another set of criteria that I'm looking for. So I've got my little comment here, moving averages rising, and the 50-day simple moving average of closing price is above the simple day 50 moving average from 10 days ago. So you can actually add in little operators like this to kind of offset specific technical or fundamental factors. So in this case, I've got the 50 is above the 50 day from 10 days ago. I've got the 100 above the 100 from 15 days ago. And I've got the 200 above the 200 from 20 days ago. You can see exactly how that sort of reads out. And again, if you kind of read these lines and just don't think about the sort of the scary symbols and things like that, they actually read pretty intuitively. So sort of wrapping this up, we've got volume above average. So we can actually do specific moving averages and technical indicators on other factors like volume. So in this case, we've got an and line, which is the 5-day EMA, the exponential moving average, 5-day of volume trading above the 50-day simple moving average of volume. So short-term volume is above kind of intermediate-term volume. That's what that line is looking for. We go down another comment. We've got the scooter above 50. This one pretty straightforward. And the scooter is above 50. Couldn't be easier. And then we've got an EMA of the scooter line above 65. That one gets a little bit crazier. So we've got our factors in there. And again, each one is just another piece of criteria on its own line, starting with and. If we wanted to have multiple different things together, kind of like we did with the S&P 1500 members, we can wrap that block in brackets after the and then we can put or in there to kind of separate those different pieces of that criteria. Now, the last one I've got in here is something called rank by. So when you spit out the results, we can actually rank those results by different factors. We can rank them by closing price. We can rank them by a technical indicator like scooter. We've got a lot of options for how we want to rank those. If we don't add a rank by clause, then the results will just be organized alphabetically. But in my case, I actually like to get these results ranked by their scooter score, which is our StockCharts technical rank. So I've added that little rank by clause to the end. So if you actually just kind of read through this scan, hopefully that kind of breaks it down for you a little bit. But again, I don't actually write any of this syntax myself. I do go in and modify it, but the scan components area down below makes it incredibly easy to build scans like this without having to write any of the syntax. So I'll quickly show you what I mean. Let's say we wanted to add another factor to this scan that was something like RSI above 50. So we've got sort of positive momentum according to the RSI indicator. Well, we'll add first our comment. I'm going to do RSI above, I'll turn on my all caps there, above 50. So there's my little comment. And again, I've started that out with a slash, so it's going to be ignored by the scan workbench. Now, what we're going to do is go down to that scan components area. And if we're looking for RSI, that's going to be a technical indicator. So we're going to open up that technical indicators menu. We're going to scroll all the way down to find RSI. Once we've selected that in the menu, we're going to hit add. Now that's going to add at the bottom of our scan workbench area. So I'm actually going to copy that line, delete that from there, and paste it exactly where I want it. Now I'm going to type this as a caps just so that I can keep things consistent. But as you can see, that's added that little line to the scan components area, scan workbench area. RSI 14 period, so the 14 period RSI above 70. Now that's kind of the default that gets injected there. So when I say I modify this stuff, but I don't necessarily write it myself, this is a great example. If I want RSI above 50, well, there you go. I just modify that little line, but I've actually used the scan components area down below to build that in. Once I add that, I can hit save, and there we go. We've now got that saved to our scan. So this scan components area makes it very, very easy to actually start writing these scans yourself. You really don't have to memorize this code and the format of everything. You can actually just use these menus down below to start building your scans. Now, speaking of starting to build your scans, again, I want to review those resources really quick. So first and foremost, the instructions page is going to be incredibly helpful for you. As you dig into the Advanced Scan Workbench, definitely take a quick pass through this instructions page. Take a look at the basics video here as well. I believe Arthur Hill actually put this together a few years ago. A great video, really helps you kind of dig into scanning and how they work. But this has a ton of detail for you, really digs into kind of the nitty-gritty details more than we can do in our short show today. We'll keep doing more scanning episodes, but this instructions page is going to be very, very helpful for you. Once you've read through that and you're ready to start writing your own custom scans, you've got that writing scans page, which will help you actually structure your scans, get a little more complex with different comparison operators, different things like crossing above, crossing below. It'll talk through scan expressions and all of that. So this writing scans page, very, very helpful. We do also have a lot of scan examples here in our documentation area. You can actually drill into any of these different groups, and that'll have the scan code for all of those different sample scans right there in the documentation page. You can just copy that to your browser and paste it right in here, kind of like we did when I moved the RSI up a little bit. You can just paste any code right into here, any scan code right into there. Very, very easy to do that. Now, next up, you do also have some resources that help you run scans without having to write anything and without having to even see the scan workbench. So first up, we've got our predefined scans page. You've got a tab for that right up at the top here. And you can see what this page does is actually shows you scan results for predefined scans. These are popular scans that we know a lot of users like to run, things like new 52-week highs or strong volume gainers. So you can actually see the number of results that have triggered any of these scans. You can see there are a ton of them, candlestick patterns, down into PNF patterns as well. But for any of these, if you want to get the results back, you can actually just click on the number right over here on the left, and that's going to pull up the results for that scan. So if you want to scan for new 52-week highs without actually writing any of that code, there you go. It's right there for you. You can go back there and explore any of these and actually filter by specific indexes as well. One other resource very similar to this on our charts and tools page, down here we've got our sample scan library. Now this is another kind of interactive collection of scans that you can actually run in just one click. Any of the scans on this page, it's kind of an ever-growing collection. We're continuing to add more and more scans to this. A lot of them are kind of duplicates of that predefined scans page at the moment, but we've also got scans from the experts down here. And again, this is going to continue to grow over time. For any of these though, you can hit the green run button to quickly run that scan, again, in just one click. Or if you want to use any of these and start to kind of build your own off of it, you can actually hit edit. That's going to pull that code right into the scan workbench. You can hit reformat to put it all on separate lines just like that, and you're off to the races. So a couple of scanning tools that you can use there without having to write your own custom code. Really, really easy. So that's going to do it for us on today's show. I want to thank you so much for joining me again on our product focus show here, digging into the tools, digging into the features of scanning. Always a fun one. There is so much more to cover when it comes to scanning. So we are going to continue to do more and more episodes on this all important feature. Honestly, one of the most powerful in all of StockCharts. So stay tuned for that. Remember, we do this show every Friday, though, 3 p.m. Eastern, up on the live channel, also up on our YouTube channel and the on-demand platform at StockChartsTV.com. So definitely stay tuned for more StockCharts in Focus coming very soon. We will be back next week with another episode, so stay tuned for that. Again, I'm your host for the show, though. My name is Grayson Roze, Vice President of Operations here at StockCharts. It's been wonderful to be with you. I will see you again very soon. But until then, Chart on, my friends.